Hi there, Dave Prowse here. This is a continuation of a webinar that I did where we didn't have time to get to directory services. So I just wanted to do a quick video on this and show an installation of FreeIPA and some basic configuration and connect a client or two to the FreeIPA directory server. So directory services deals with user accounts and other objects and resources. So if you log into a network, generally you're logging on to a directory server of some sort. And you can see here that I have a little diagram of a couple computers. I've already set up a DHCP server, and that's handing out IP addresses to clients and other TCP/IP information. I've also set up a DNS server, and that is taking care of name to IP resolution. And in fact, that's one computer that's doing both of those, one virtual machine. But now we're going to set up a directory server to handle those logins from the client computer. And there's a bunch of different directory servers out there. Some open source examples include 389DS, also FreeIPA, which is what we're going to show. And that, in fact, has 389DS incorporated into it. There's also Apache Directory and OpenLDAP. Now, these are all open source solutions. There's other solutions as well for directory services. For example, the very commonly used Microsoft Active Directory. But we're kind of focusing on Linux and open source here. If I'm working on the Fedora side of things, then I work with FreeIPA, and that, as I mentioned, incorporates 389DS for the actual directory services. It does a lot more, but it incorporates that 389DS. Or if I'm working on the Debian side of things, I'll set up an OpenLDAP server for directory services. And there's a whole lot of configuration that goes into that. So we're just going to show a basic setup of FreeIPA on a Fedora server that I've already installed. And of course, FreeIPA on Fedora then upstreams to Red Hat, which uses IPA, and then that downstreams to CentOS. So you could do this on any of those. The installations and configurations will be slightly different, but essentially the same concepts. Now, all of these directory servers are based on the LDAP protocol, Lightweight Directory Access Protocol, or LDAP. And by default, a directory server such as this will use inbound ports 389 and, for more security, 636. So those are the ports we utilize here. The inbound ports for the directory server. So that server has to have those open on the firewall, as well as some other ports for Kerberos and so on. So that's just a basic example of directory services. Now, you might have a directory server working on a web server or for an email server, but what I'm kind of focusing in on is clients and users that are trying to log in so they can share folders and, so they can share applications and directories and so forth. Okay, so a little bit about directory services. Here we're going to do this on a Fedora server. I've already installed Fedora Server 32, and we're going to have to do some configurations here. Now, I mentioned I already have a Debian server that is acting as a DHCP and a DNS device. So I have that up and running already, and here it is. And this is debserver.example.com. And so let's just show this real quick. I am running DHCP on here and DNS. DHCP isn't really necessary for this, but that's just taking care of all the client TCP/IP needs. One of the important things it's taking care of is the DNS server address for the clients. So this computer, its IP address is 172.21.0.51. That's my deb server. Fully qualified domain name, debserver.example.com. Okay, let's just take a quick look at the DHCP side of things. And we have the main configuration file. Okay, and we have the subnet, the IP pool that I'm using here from 162 to 185. I've got the router, and that's the gateway, and the domain name server, which is this server. It is right now, the DNS server, 172.21.0.51. That is the IP address of this system. And so if any clients connect, they're going to get an IP address from within this range. And they will also be assigned the gateway address here and this DNS IP address. And so this particular server can also access the internet. If we make a connection out, this is one of my fun domain names, you can see that I can ping the internet. One place that we will not be able to ping is example.com. The internet address will not function. That's going to actually function within my network because I've set that within DNS. So this guy is not only a DHCP server, it's also a DNS server. Let's take a look at that. And if we look in our bind folder, and let me get to the top here. If we look in our bind folder, we'll see that we have all our information here. I've already configured a lot of stuff. This was done during the webinar, just reviewing this real quick. If we go to our zones folder, you will see that we've created 2 zones already. A forward lookup zone, which is dbexample.com, and a reverse lookup zone, db.21.172. Let's take a look at the forward lookup zone because I do want to make a change here as well. So we'll do a vim db.example.com. Feel free to use whatever editor you want. And I'm going to maximize this. And you can see that I have the deb server here and its IP address. I also added some A records, some additional clients. We have deb client, which I have on .165, and fed-IPA, which I've already added, which is the host entry for our IPA server that we're about to create. But we're going to have to configure that server and set up the networking for it as well. I also configured example.com to react on .51. Now this is something that you might change depending on where example.com is located. And in fact, I want to have the Kerberos realm set up for my IPA server. That's where it's going to be. So I want that to be configured here as well. So I'm going to actually delete this. Go back in because I wasn't inserting. I'm going to delete this and change it to all uppercase. If you see all uppercase, you know you're dealing with a Kerberos realm. That's what we want here. And I could even do that with the lowercase as well. And I'm going to change it. I don't want it to be 51. I want it to be 53. I want it to be the IPA server that we're about to set up. Okay, so that's how you'd add an entry here into the bind server. Now again, we've done all this already, but I just wanted to review those entries and make sure they were there. And so we'll save this. And I also want to check the reverse lookup zone to make sure that that is there as well. Oops. Okay, and I do not have fed IPA here, so I'm going to add that. And it's going to be the IP address in reverse, so 53.0.21.172.in-addr.arpa. and it will add it as a pointer record. And this is going to be, the name of the computer is going to be fed-ipa.example.com. Put a dot on the end. Escape out of here and save it. And let me just check example.com again, make sure we have that dot on the end there, otherwise it won't function. Sometimes I forget that. We're good. And then we have to restart the bind DNS service. So that's a systemctl restart bind. Press enter and then check it. Okay, looks good. It's active. We've got our example.com zone and we've got our reverse zone. So forward and reverse are working. Looks good so far. We can even test that host to see if the fully qualified domain name resolution will work by pinging fed-ipa, and it does resolve it, but it doesn't see the address yet. The IP address is unknown because I haven't configured that on the server. So that is good news so far. And at this point, we need to configure the actual Fedora server. Like I say, I already installed Fedora 32 server. And what I need to do is set that server as static. Now, again, most of the time we'll use static for servers. It all depends on your environment. But I'm going to set it for static here and modify all this. I'm probably not going to use 52 because I already have that used by something else. I'm going to use 53. But I've highlighted all the sections that will be different for you because your IP network may be completely different. You may be on 10.0.2, you might be on 192.168 or something. Who knows? So you're going to have to configure your server to meet the requirements of your IP scheme. So let's bring up that server, and I do want to set that as 53. I'm going to load that up now, and I'm running in KVM here, but whatever virtualization platform you're in, you're going to want to get that VM going. And we're going to have to take a look at what we have here. So I've logged in as root, and let's take a look. Okay, the address is showing as 172.21.200.112. And hopefully you can see this. It's a little small font. I'm going to SSH in as soon as I change the IP address. But we need to modify that. Now, previously in the webinar, we were working in Debian, which was all using the networking service. But if you're working with Fedora Server and anything on the Fedora side of things, you're working with Network Manager service. So that means we will want to use the nmcli command to modify the server. And that goes for Debian if you have a desktop client as well. If you've installed a desktop environment, you'll get Network Manager. If you do not, and you just run the console, it goes back just to the networking service. But anyways, we need to use the nmcli command. And if we do that, you'll see a nice, let me maximize this. Here we go. You'll see a nice view of all the information, and we can see the name of the adapter, ENP1S0 in green. We can see the IP address that it's getting. It's getting that from a DHCP server. I'm going to remove that. And so to do that, we'll do that with the nmcli command. I'm going to clear the screen. I'm at the top here. So we'll do an nmcli, and we want to do a connection modify. And we can shorten those words by doing con mod. And then we want to specify what the name of that adapter is. So if you forget, here it is, ENP1S0 for me. For you, it's going to be whatever that adapter name is. So I'm going to put in nmcli con mod ENP1S0. And then we'll modify the IP configuration. You can also go into nmcli interactive mode, but I kind of like to just do this in one line. So it's going to be IP version 4.address. That's the first parameter, and we have to specify what address we want. I want 172.21.0.53/16 for me, because it's a 255.255.0.0 subnet mask. Space IP version 4.gateway, and that is 172.21.0.51. Space IP version 4.dns, and that's going to be that server that we just showed. Oh, I'm sorry, I made a mistake there. The gateway is just .1. It's a separate device altogether, getting out for me. That's going to be your gateway address. Then IP version 4 DNS, and that's going to be the Debian server that I just showed that's running DNS and DHCP. That's 172.21.0.51. And then finally, IP version 4.method. I want this to be a static IP address, so we want it to be manual. That's the name we'll put in there. So that should change everything. I'm just checking it. IP address looks good. Gateway, DNS, and method manual. Press enter. We get no results. We get no answer, so it should have gone through properly. And we just need to down and up that network adapter to make it take effect. So it's nmcli con down, and the name of the adapter, EMP1S0. It says it successfully deactivated it, and I'll up arrow and change it to up to bring that adapter back up, and successfully activated. Now we'll do an nmcli again, and we're good. It has changed the IP address. It has changed the gateway. It has changed the DNS server. You can see under DNS configuration. So we should be good at this point. One other thing we could add is a domain search, but not really that important because we're going to install the domain here on this computer. Now I want to reboot and verify that those changes are going to work. We want to make sure that we can get out to the internet. And I apologize for the quality of audio here. This has been working from home, so I don't have my good audio equipment set up, just on the computer headset. And I'm doing all this stuff on a Debian client computer, by the way, which is pretty cool. All right, let's take a look. Let's see, first of all, if we can ping out to the internet. There's that domain, and that is good. That's good news. Now let's see if we can ping something like deb server and get the fully qualified domain name. Oh, no good. So we have to check what's going on here. I haven't done anything on the hostname side, so we're going to have to check that, and also the search domain. So let's do a vim etc/hostname. And it shows as FedIPA. Well, that's not the full name that I want to use for this computer. We want a fully qualified domain name. So I've got to change that to fed-ipa.example.com. Got to have that domain, whatever domain you choose. We'll save that. Okay, and we can also add the domain in there as well if we wanted to. The domain information, if we want to do a domain search. I did not add that to the DHCP server. That would be a domain dash search option, and you could put in the domain name. And yeah, I did not do that. And we could add that here if we wanted to. And we would do that with the nmcli command. Shouldn't be necessary. I'm going to add that on the client side. But let me reboot one more time since we've changed the host name. And make sure that we can connect once again. Got to have that host name set up properly, otherwise nothing's going to function. Okay, and let's try it again, if I can type. There we go. So that was it. I just had not changed the host name yet. And when we do a ping of deb server, at this point it does see debserver.example.com, and it sees the IP of that server .51. Do an nmcli just to make sure everything's good. We are on .53. The DNS server is .51. So that's awesome. I'm going to exit out of here. All right, that is up and running. So at this point, I can now SSH in because the IP is set properly. Okay, on my left here, I have deb server. I'm going to leave that open. On the right, I'm going to SSH into the Fedora server and work from there. So this is going to be user 172.21.0.53. Okay, and I've already connected under this IP before, so I need to remove that from my known hosts list. Okay, and now we should be able to connect. There we go. Good, and we're logged in as user. Now we'll escalate our privileges to root. And we're in. So now we're at root at fed-IPA. You can check that with a quick nmcli, and we're SSH'd in. Now we can do what we need to do and get into the actual install. Okay, so here we go. I changed the static IP. I changed the host name. We're in good shape here. I did not actually configure the search domain. We could do that. And you can see here that's an nmcli conmod, name of the adapter, which will be different for you, IP version 4.dns-search, and then the name of the domain. So we can add that. That's fine. We'll do that now. And that's going to be, for me, enp1s0. IP version 4. I should have added this before when I did the nmcli command, but no worries. DNS search, and then that's going to be quotes. Let me just maximize this. That's going to be quotes here for example.com. That's the domain we're going to want to search here. Okay. Enter that in. And we'll reboot that computer, and I'll have to SSH in again in just a moment. And we can verify connectivity one more time. All right. See if it's back up. It is. I'm doing this in real time, so I'm not editing this video at all. So that booted pretty quick. All right, and we'll run an nmcli, and we'll see that, yes, now our search domain is example.com. We have our DNS server, we have our search domain, and the interface that that's using, and our IP address here. So all is good. And I don't think we need to ping anything else because that was working before. So now we'll move on to the FreeIPA installation. This is, again, for Fedora 32 server. If you want to do this on Debian, good luck. IPA is not really supported. It's a Fedora project. You can try to install it, but there's going to be all kinds of dependencies that are not going to work. And that's why if I'm just dealing with the Debian environment, it's going to be Open LDAP in that case for the directory server. So this is the installation for Fedora. Red Hat's going to be modified a little bit, and CentOS is going to have some additional steps as well before you can actually install. So let's get into that installation, and I'll bring up that guy again. And so let's do it. It's going to be, first of all, we should actually do a DNF update. normally before you do an installation like this, unless in your environment you're not supposed to be doing updates, but generally you'd want to do this. I've already done the update, so we should be in good shape. And we're going to do a DNF install space IPA-server. Now, I am not installing the DNS server, and that's because I already have a DNS server. I'm going to utilize that one. It gets a little more tricky when you're using separate servers to do this. If you needed to, and in a lot of cases, if you're in a Fedora or Red Hat environment, you will install DNS, and you would do that by adding IPA-DNS. And that actually incorporates one of their versions of a bind server. So you could do that if you wish, but we're not installing DNS here, just the IPA server itself. Okay, so that's going to check the updates. It's going to start downloading the content. It's going to take a little bit, so we'll let that go. Oh, well, first we'll say yes to it. And I had gotten a question, and I get this a couple times, why Perl? People keep seeing Perl. Perl is still used for a lot of different things, but anyways, that's something you'll see there as well as Python. We're going to say yes to this, and it's going to download and install those packages. Okay, so we got to do the installation of that, and then we need to do the setup, which is going to take a couple minutes as well with an IPA server install. Then we're going to open ports on the firewall. Now, if you were also installing the DNS server, you'd append this with IPA-DNS, and you'd append this with /setup-DNS, and then you'd have to add port 53 here on the firewall for TCP and UDP. Because the firewall is completely closed right now. All the ports are shut. We have to open up what we need here. Let's see how this is doing so far. Okay, still running. And what you see here, we have port 80. Port 80 is HTTP. And that's for web server access, which we will show real quick. Then we have 443, which is also for web server access. That's HTTPS. Then we have port 389, which we mentioned already is the inbound directory services port for 389DS, and really anything LDAP based. And then the secure version with TLS, that's port 636. Then we have port 88, which is Kerberos, and 464, which also utilizes that. On the UDP side, we have 88, Kerberos, 464, and 123. So you need to have ports here for connectivity from external clients, not only for directory services, but also for Kerberos authentication. You want to be taking care of time synchronization, and you want to make sure that DNS is also set up in the case that you're installing that as well. And to do that, we'll be doing a firewall CMD command and adding the ports individually. I also have a script on GitHub for this that can add a ton of ports at the same time as long as you type in those numbers. Either way you want to do it. Okay, let's take a look and see how far we got. It is complete. Cool. Nice. All right. At this point, we can go ahead with the actual server setup. So we'll do an IPA-server-install. And again, if you were also working with DNS, you do a /setup-DNS. But we already have our DNS server and we're pointing to it. So we're going to install that now. We'll press enter. And this is going to ask some questions here of us. There's a lot of information that we have to answer with this. First, do you want to configure integrated DNS? And they use bind for that. The answer is no, because we already are using DNS. Then it says enter the fully qualified domain name of the computer on which you're setting up the server software, and it knows the name already. We have set up the fully qualified domain name within the hostname file. and that is fed-ipa.example.com. So we'll press enter for that. Then it says the domain name has been determined based on the host name, and that is correct, example.com. So we'll press enter. And then please provide a realm name. Kerberos normally utilizes the same name. If your domain name is example.com, then the Kerberos name will be the same name, all caps. And that's what we want. We'll press enter. Now we have to set up a directory manager password. So get yourself a complex password and then confirm it. And then we need an IPA admin password. When you do work on the IPA server, you do it as admin and whatever password you're choosing here. So again, another complex password. Confirm it. Okay, do you want to configure, and let me maximize the screen here, do you want to configure Chrony? If you want to do this for chronological updates of time, you can. That's not really necessary for us here. That should be working on both Debian and Fedora Server automatically, and I'm going to say no. And it says, okay, here's your values. fed-ipa.example.com is the host name. IP address is 172.21.0.53. We're creating the domain example.com, which will work in conjunction with our forward lookup zone domain. And we're setting the realm name example.com for Kerberos in caps. Okay, then it's creating a distinguished name, common name of certificate authority, and an object example.com. And this is a self-signed certificate. Now this is all part of dealing with a directory server. You've got to have certificates for encryption. You've got to have Kerberos for secure authentication, and so on. All right, and then it says continue to configure the system with these values. I'm going to say yes. And that will attempt the time synchronization with Chrony C. Let's see how it goes. Okay, that was successful. Time synchronization was good. And now it's going to configure the directory server. By default, it's calling it dir srv. We could have used a parameter to change that to something like ds1 or whatever, but that's fine, dir srv. That's the default that 389ds has used for ages. So as you can see here, there's a lot of steps for the configuration. Now it's configuring the Kerberos KDC server. Here's one, IPA Custodia. The Custodia program is something that Debian has some trouble with. And this is one of the reasons that IPA will fail on Debian and Ubuntu. You'll have a lot of issues with that. It just isn't designed for that side of Linux. It's designed by the Fedora project. So it's designed for Fedora, Red Hat, and CentOS. Now it's configuring the certificate server instance. And that's going to take a little bit of time to do the rest of this. So we'll jump back here for a little bit. And like I said, this is going to be our directory server. This is going to be our FreeIPA directory server where our users will log in. They will connect to that server. And I'm just going to check my recording and make sure we're still recording here, and it looks good. But I'm utilizing this DNS server for name resolution. And all the clients that are obtaining IP addresses automatically are utilizing this DHCP server to tell them what their IP address will be, what their gateway address will be, and what the IP address of the DNS server is, and what the domain name is for the network. So the beauty of that is all this information is assigned to the clients automatically, and they just have to log in. All right, let's see where we're at. Still doing the certificates. All right, so we could do some other stuff while that's working. And one of those things is I want to set up the deb client. Okay, the deb client. And look at the amount of CPU usage the IPA server is working with here. What's your favorite IPA? FreeIPA. Today, right now at least, for this moment. But we're going to work with this deb client as well. Let's bring that one up. Start him. Okay. Go full screen. And let's take a look. All right, that is still using the IP that I set up previously, 172.21.0.165 during the webinar. So it's still getting that information from the DHCP server. It's retained that info, and we can test that with a ping. First of all, we want to ping and make sure a name resolution is working. And it is for deb server. And let's check Fed IPA. And it is. It sees fedipa.example.com, and it sees it on .53. And lastly, let's check the internet. And that is good as well. So the IP address of this guy is 172.21.0.165. I'm going to connect to that with another terminal. And I don't really need to, well, yes, actually I do. If we're going to set this up as a client on the IPA network, I have to be set up as root. All right, so the deb client is set to go. Looks good. And let's check our installation. Okay, now it's configuring the directory server. It's configuring TLS. We want to have transport layer security for that. It's configuring the certificate authority, restarting, and it should be done soon. Okay, configuring the web interface. This is why we have to have 80 and 443 open, so that we can access with the web console if we want to, which is, you know, a good thing to do. Sometimes it can make quicker work of doing some troubleshooting of the server if you have to restart services and so forth. Okay, actually it's upgrading IPA now. Hopefully we don't have a failure along the way. We should be good. There's a lot happening on this host computer, but we should be okay. We've got the deb server running, we've got the deb client running, and we've got that IPA server running as well. Okay, restarting the KDC, configuring client-side components. Okay, and boom. Please add records in this file to your DNS system, which we can do later. Next steps, it shows you must make sure that these network ports are open. Notice it does not show port 53 or DNS because we did not opt to install DNS. It also tells you can obtain a Kerberos ticket using this command. Okay, KINIT admin. Kinit admin, and you have to do that first before you can do any type of work like adding users or computers or what have you. It also tells you should back up your certificate authority certificates, which is here. And if you want to do replicas, if you want to do replication of the IPA server, you're going to need that. And then the password for these is the directory manager password. I'm not dealing with any backups in this video, but it does say the IPA server install command was successful. This, used to be a massive, massive piece of work when you would install 389DS and Kerberos and TLS and SASL and configuring the certificates. It was a lot more, and now this makes things a lot easier for the average person to work with. So that's it. FedIPA is up and running. And as I mentioned, we do have to set up the firewall. And I was talking about that here. We have to open those ports. So we can do that now. I have a lot of windows open, so please bear with me. And we'll do that with the firewall-cmd command. So that's a firewall-cmd -- permanent, because if we don't use that, it'll set the hole in the firewall, but it'll open that port in the firewall. But if we reboot, it won't be persistent. You want a persistent open port, which we do for this IPA server. Then we have to do a -- permanent. Then we'll do a -- add -port. Let me maximize this. Equals, and then the port number. First one is 80, and we have to know the transport layer for that port. Which protocol on the transport layer are we talking about here? We're talking about TCP. There's a bunch of TCP ones, and then there's some UDP ones. So we want to add this on. So we'll press enter, and it says success. And I'm just going to add them one at a time here instead of using the script or anything else. 443 is HTTPS, success. And I do want to make sure that each one is successful. 389, super important. That's the actual directory services. Because the first two, that's really just for HTTPS access, for web access, HTTP and HTTPS respectively. We want that web access for our web console later, but not really needed. We can do everything we need to do on the command line. But this has to be open, otherwise directory services won't work at all. And then for secure directory services, 636. Success. Okay, then we need Kerberos ports. That's 88. Success. And 464. Success. And again, if you were running DNS, you would do 53. But we're not doing that. We do have some UDP ports we have to add. Kerberos, so we'll do 88/UDP, User Datagram Protocol. That's connectionless. We'll press enter. Then also 464 for UDP. Success. And finally 123. And success. And again, you would have to do 53 for UDP. In fact, this is super important if you're running DNS on the system. Got to have 53 on UDP open. But we don't need that. Those are all now added on, and we can go ahead and, well, we want to reboot and then check. So I'm going to reboot now. And give that a moment. And we're going to check that with a firewall-cmd space --list-ports. Let's see if it's back up. It is. That was pretty fast, seeing as how we just installed IPA. And we'll upgrade our privileges here. We'll go to root. And that command was this, firewall-cmd --list-ports. And there we go. Let's double check them. 80 and 443, 389 and 636, 88 and 464, and for UDP, 88, 464, and 123. Cool. That guy is set up. Okay, now a little bit of configuration. First, we have to use the init admin command so that we can obtain an initial Kerberos ticket to use the IPA tools so that we can add users and add computers. And so that's going to be that admin password that we set up, the directory manager password. And if you get no results, that's good. And then we can go ahead and create users and accounts and all kinds of good stuff. I'm not going to get too much into it here, but we'll create a couple of user accounts. You do that with an IPA user add space, and we'll add in password here, and we'll just set that to something like test for now, because when the user actually connects, they'll have to change that. And so that's -- password. And you can do other things too. You could do things like -- home directory to set that, and you could set that to, whatever it might be, whatever the user might be. But I'm just going to do this for now and add a couple users, one at a time. And you can script this, and there's other commands to add lots at one time. So press enter. First name, let's call this, we'll make 2 users. We'll start with demo user 2. User login, no, we want this to be demo_user 2, just in case there's a demo user somewhere on the network already, which I might have. Press enter. I'll just put test for the password. That's going to get changed later when demo user 2 logs in. And I'm going to make a note here that I did demo_user 2. I'll do that one more time. You'd create them whatever the name of the user is, and whatever the naming convention is for your particular network. And you just have to put the username. You don't have to put the domain name, because IPA knows. We're using example.com. Put in the password, and that has also been created. And it gives you all the information there. Unique IDs are associated with each user when you use 389 DS. And if you want to see all the users that you have, you can do an IPA space user-find space -- and that'll give you all the users. And you can send that out to a file or whatever if you want, or just view it here. Here's our demo user 2, and here's our William Penn user. I'm coming from Pennsylvania. Seemed like a good name. Anyways, that's done. We've created some user accounts, and now we can go and connect with those user accounts from client computers. You can also add computer accounts. That's not necessary if, say, you're connecting with a Linux computer, because that computer will get added as the user logs in. But let's say you were getting a little bit more in depth with it, and you wanted to add, say, a Windows 10 computer or something different than Linux. Then we could do an IPA space host-add, and then specify the host name. But that host name has to exist on the network. I think this exists right now, win10ent. Nope. Oh, and not fully qualified either. Let's check it. Am I running that? I am not. Let's start that up. I thought that I had changed the host name and set that up. Maybe not. That's going to take a moment to boot because it's Windows 10 Enterprise and we're running a lot of stuff. Let's bring up DNS because it might not be in the zone either. You got to be in the zone. And it is not. I'm going to add an entry for win10 ent.example.com .ina 172.21.0. Ooh, I don't know what the IP is. Could be anything. Let's find out. Well, now the video is getting pretty long and getting kind of in depth, but we have seen the IPA server install and configuration so far. This is an eval copy. Oh, I forgot I'm using no machine on this. Oh, that's okay. Let's just go in and take a look. This is 166. Ooh, he got an IP address from the DHCP server. Awesome. Good stuff. So we can add that. (166). There it is. And then we can add a, well, first of all, we'll save this, and then we can modify the reverse zone as well. And that was db.21.172, and add an entry for that guy. And that's again in reverse 166.0.21.172.in-addr.arpa. Now we can do all this stuff dynamically. We haven't gotten to this point yet for clients and haven't shown anything about this, but that obviously is something we'd want to do if we're doing lots of client computers. This type of thing, adding these PTR records, is more for server accounts and so on. Stuff that will be there all the time. All right, this looks good. We'll save it. Go back to our IPA server and run that command again. Oh, do it one more time. Now, I was not typing in the fully qualified domain name, but I had to do all those configurations anyway, and the system wasn't even running. But let's do it. Okay. Oh, I didn't restart the DNS server. Silly me. And that may require a reboot of the IPA server as well. Okay, let's check it, make sure it's running properly with no errors. Okay, restarted the bind server. Let's reboot the IPA server just to make sure that gets up to date. You could also restart services on the IPA server. But let's get that one up to date here. Give that a moment to reboot. And you can see the host name of my Windows client, Win10 ENT. There's a lot of steps involved in getting a Windows 10 client connected properly to IPA. I'm not going to get into that today. I'm just showing the addition of a host name. And let's connect again. It's up. Okay, and let's try that command again and see if we can add win10 ent.example.com. It added it. All right, and actually, we didn't have to add, oh no, we did. I'm sorry. We did have to add the example.com. This portion here is just the Kerberos portion. So that's how you would add a computer account on for a system that's not Linux based, because again, if we connect with the Linux computer, that's going to add computer accounts for that system. And that's what we want to do next. We want to connect with some clients. That's actually going to be it for this video, I believe. All right, and these slides, they had all the information, all the stuff we were doing here. But let's get into the client configuration. I'm going to start with Debian, and then I'll do Fedora. There's not going to be time for Windows 10. That's going to take a lot of work, and this video is getting long already. But we want to add the search for example.com on the Debian client. Then we're going to install the FreeIPA client so that it can connect and then set it up. So let's do that now. Okay, that's our Debian server. That is our IPA server. And there is our client. All right. So if we do an IPA, we see that we are at this IP address. Okay. And so let's do vim etc resolve.conf. And we can see here that the name server is .51. That was given to us automatically by the DNS server. Excuse me, by the DHCP server. And we can add the search domain here, search example.com. We could also have had that information given to the clients automatically at the DNS server. Let me save this. If we go to the configuration file for the DHCP server, if we take a look at that, what we would do is we would add another option here, and that option would be the domain search option. So we'd have to modify this a little bit. We'd have to put a comma on here and then add a new section. So open curly braces, and then we would do name in quotes, colon, and then it would be example.com. Close quotes, comma, and then this is the last option data, so we would just close it. Oh, sorry. I did not do this correctly. It's not example.com for the name. We need the name of the parameter here, which is domain search, comma. Then we would put in the data set for that. My apologies. And that would be, in quotes, example.com. Quote. Okay. And that's the last item. We would not put a comma there. Now, another way to do this, I like to use code numbers for these. Instead of name, you could do code, and the code for domain search is 119. And you wouldn't need quotes for that, I believe. So you could add that information, and then example.com would automatically go to all the clients as the domain search. I'm not going to save that. I'm going to leave it as is and not mess up the works right now. We'll go back to the client, and we'll get back into that IPA installation. So this is Debian client. So to do the install for FreeIPA client, we just do, well, first of all, we want to make sure we're good with example.com. And we are. It's seeing the IPA server. I just pinged example.com. It sees the IPA server. We should be good. As long as we could do that, we should be able to configure the IPA client. So we shouldn't have to reboot this guy. So we're going to do an apt install space FreeIPA-client. You could also work with DNS updates. We don't have to do that. We're already taking care of DNS, but that's an apt install FreeIPA-client. Press enter. We'll say Y for yes to get this rolling. A ton of Python in there. Okay, then it says, when users attempt to use Kerberos and specify a principal or username without specifying what administrative Kerberos realm that principal belongs to, the system appends the default realm. This is the default realm, but it's what we want. It is what we're using. Example.com in capitals. Okay. Then it says enter the host names of Kerberos servers in the example.com Kerberos realm separated by spaces. And that's going to be fed-IPA. And again, fed-IPA for the administrative server. and that's going to go ahead and unpack the information that is required and do the installation on the Deb client. I'm going to check my video. Still recording. Hopefully the whole recording goes through. I'm recording on OBS on this Linux computer. But I've really never done a recording this long on OBS. So I just want to check it periodically. So next we're going to set up the client with an IPA-client-install. And you could also do a --enable DNS updates, especially if DNS is working at the IPA server. And then we'll use the admin account from the IPA server and the password from that server to enroll that computer in there. Then we reboot the client and log in as one of the user accounts that we created. For example, demo user 2 or William Penn. Let's see how we're doing. That's the server. There's the Fed IPA. And here's the client. It's done. Cool. So let's do the IPA client install. IPA-client-install. And I'll just do the enable DNS updates just for giggles. Okay, it says warning, this Debian client's using NTP. That's going to be disabled in favor of cron ed. We want that. DNS discovery failed to determine your DNS name, but it is example.com. And then provide your IPA server name. Well, for me, that's fed-ipa.example.com. And we do want to say yes to proceed with this from the Debian client. And yes to configure the system with these values. Okay, attempting to sync time. This is really the important part here. If time is not synchronized with cron EC, we're going to be in trouble. But time synchronization was successful. Who's the user authorized to enroll computers? Well, by default, it's admin on the IPA server. And we need that password that we selected during the IPA server install. Okay, there was a couple issues there. We have a couple DNS issues. This is stuff that we could work out, but again, this video is getting really long. Bottom line, the IPA client install command was successful. So I'm going to reboot that client now. Give that a moment to come back up. Ooh, it's up already. And I'm sorry, actually, we're going to go to the actual client here to show the login. I guess we could do a su command. Let's just go to the actual client. And let me find it. Lots of windows open. Here we go. So before I was logging in as root, I also have the user account. But now we want to attempt to log in to the IPA domain with a user account that we've created. For example, demo_user2. Password, I did it as test. Okay, AppArmor is allowing this to happen. Okay, what's the current password? We're just typing in test again. And then it says, hey, you have to do a new password. On Debian, it's all going to look a little bit different here. When we show a Fedora client, it'll be a little bit more seamless. But new password, okay. Type that. And type the password again. And we have no directory right now, but we are in. We are in right now into the server. This is still our client computer, but we have logged on as demo_user2. So that is good. Let's exit out of here and try logging on as william.penn. Password was test. Got to confirm it. New password. There we go. So I haven't set up child directories. I haven't set up all kinds of stuff here. Lots of configuration that we can do with that. But at least we know that we are logging in from this and it is working. All right, now I want to connect from a Fedora client. Let's see if our, well, you know what? I'm going to shut down this one and we'll turn on the Fedora client because we might be running out of power here. Start that up now. And we have a lot running, so it might take a moment. Okay, let's go full screen here. All right, this is a client I haven't used yet. So let's get in here. Okay, at this point you see the enterprise login. That's kind of what we want, but that is what we want to connect to FreeIPA, but we can't do that yet because we haven't installed the FreeIPA client utility. So I'm just going to connect as user. That's the account that I've set up already during the installation of this Fedora client, and this is Fedora client 32. I use this on one of my laptops. I definitely like it. Okay, get out of the GNOME, getting started. All right, so we don't really need to do too much in here, but let's get into the terminal. And let me increase the size of this font so we can see a little bit better. There we go. Let's do an NMCLI and see what we have. All right, this is getting an IP address from a different DHCP server. Instead of trying to shut down my other DHCP servers and all that, I'm going to give this client a static IP just to make things a little bit easier. And what were we calling this computer? .57. So be it. NMCLI con mod, and we need to know the name. It's wired connection 1. If you have spaces, we got to do quotes. Okay, and we can change it now. IP version 4 dot address, and actually we don't have to do it this way because we have a GUI. We could do it from here, or we could do it with NMTUI, and there's a couple other options, but I'll do it from here. 172.21.0. What did I say? 57/16. Let's just verify that again so I don't have a conflict. Okay, we're good. IP version 4 address is good. And now IP version 4.gateway. 172.21.0.1 is my gateway address. IP version 4.DNS. Now that's .51. .51, have to remember that. And then IP version 4 dot method, which is manual. And finally, we can add the option for the domain search. We can do that as well. I'm going to do that as a separate command, actually. So let's do this. We'll enter it. Make sure that that took. We're going to do an NMCLI con down and the name. And you can change this name with NMCLI as well. But that's successfully downed. We'll up it. Activated. NMCLI. We've got .57. Okay. So now let's add NMCLI con and con mod. Wired connection 1, and we're going to do an IP version 4 .DNS search for example.com. Enter, and it's good. but that's not going to show up immediately. We have to down it again and up it. And now we're good. It's got the search there. I like NMCLI. You could do a lot with it, and we haven't even gotten into the interactive portion, but you could do it in the GUI if you wish to, if you have a client. You know, it's not a big deal. However you want. There's NMTY and then NM connection something as well. There's a lot of options for NMCLI or for working with Network Manager. Now, let's go ahead and check if we can ping everything. First thing, Deb server. That is good. Okay, this computer is known as localhost. I don't think we need to add him, but we probably should. So let's do that also. Let's do a vim etc hostname. Oh, I don't have vim on here. Well, we'll add it. And while that's installing, we'll add that client to Deb's server to bind. Whoops. And what's my, oh yeah, db.example.com, very simple. Try that again. Let's add that. I do not have that. We're going to call this computer fed, let's call it fed client.example.com dot. I'm adding this to the forward lookup zone in the bind server, and it is 57. I think that's right. Fed client.example.com 172.21.0.57. Close that out. And we'll modify it in the, again, we're not doing anything dynamically with DNS here, so I've got to add this stuff individually. 57.0.21.172.in yada yada do. And again, that's going to be fed client example.com. And recheck that. Looks good. Close it. Restart bind 9. Check it. Okay. We're not using this client. All right. Okay, it got us in. I'm going to change the name. I'm vimmed into resolve to hostname. So I'm going to change that here for our Fedora clients. And we want fed client.example.com. And this is read only. I am not updated. Silly me. So anyways, this is the fed client here again. And let's get in. Whoa, keyboard kind of went nutty there. Let's close that and open up terminal again. Okay. Need to do a sudo -i so we can get in as root. Because Fedora keeps that closed off by default. And I'm going to set a password for root while we're in here. Okay, there we go. So now we can go ahead and change the host name. fedclient.example.com. Save it. Check our NMCLI one more time, and let's reboot. Rebooting the client. So this is the Fedora Workstation client configuration we're doing. I'm using GNOME as the desktop, but it'll work effectively in the same way. All the command line stuff we did will be exactly the same. And then connecting, once we actually connect to IPA, will be very similar if you're using KDE, but I prefer GNOME for this. Ooh, we're already in. Okay, we'll open up a terminal once again. I logged in as user because I don't like to log into systems directly as root if I don't have to, but also I already configured this terminal to have a bigger font. So connect as root. And now we can go ahead and do the install of the IPA client. And again, if you're dealing with DNS, you would do a DNS, enable DNS updates. And yes, we do. Okay, so we spent some time doing the installation. I'm going to check my recording, see if we're still good. Still recording. Okay, hopefully it didn't crash on us. But this is the last item for this video. We're going to complete this installation, reboot, and then set up the user account within the GUI side of things. Okay, and I kind of skipped a step. In fact, I totally skipped a step. I didn't do DNF install FreeIPA client. I just said set up the client because Fedora knows. Fedora Client 32 knows about IPA. And it asked us, it said, do you want to install the FreeIPA client? Well, yeah, we have to in order to do the setup. There we go. And again, DNS issues, stuff we have to configure here. But oh, it failed to get the user input. So that's okay. We'll do the install again because it did the installation, and we'll do the setup again, I should say. It calls it an install, but this is what we want, example.com for our IPA server. The name of the IPA server is fed-ipa.example.com. We're going to say yes to override and yes to configure cronny D as the NTP server. Actually, we wanted to say no to that. I'm going to close out of this again because I was kind of confusing the issue. Again, if you're doing this from a Fedora client or other similar Linux clients, you would start with the DNF install FreeIPA-client. Once that's installed, then you would run the setup program, which is IPA-client-install, and you could also incorporate the -- enable DNS updates. So let's do it again. We need the domain name. That's example.com. Then we need the IPA server name, fed-ipa.example.com. Proceed with fixed values and no DNS discovery. We'll say yes to this. And do we want to configure cronny with NTP server? We're just going to say no for this because this is going to synchronize anyway. And it shows us our information. We're going to be fedclient.example.com, and that's going to get created automatically on the IPA server in the Kerberos realm, example.com, all caps, using the DNS domain, example.com, and that is the IPA server. And this is just showing you the distinguished name information, right? Our component example and our component com. That's generally how you work with directory services. You'll put this whole section in quotes for those names. when you're dealing with distinguished names. And finally, configure the system with these values. Yes. Okay, and again, like I said, it's going to attempt to sync time with cron EC. It should be successful. I don't think I did anything with time here. The time is correct. Good. It was successful. User authorized to enroll computers. Once again, that's admin on the IPA server. That's the default name. And we got to type in the password for that. Enrolled in IPA realm. Again, we have some DNS issues. And when you're dealing with IPA, you may want to have DNS installed with the IPA server. It actually will get past a lot of these issues automatically that we don't have to configure. But the IPA client install command was successful. And we want to reboot one more time for that Fedora client. Bring that one back up. I really like Fedora 32. I'm running it on a Toshiba laptop, and it runs pretty well. It's an older laptop. It actually runs pretty well. So I'm just logging in as user here to the local computer. And then we need to set up an enterprise login for this system. So we're going to go to our settings. Then we're going to go to users. And I wonder if I should have connected as root here. I don't think so. So we're going to go to users and we're going to unlock this. Put in our password. Then we could go and add a user. And we have a couple options, standard or administrator. I'm doing standard, but we don't want to do this for the local system. We want to do an enterprise login. So we'll select enterprise login. The domain we want is example.com. And then we can select a username. For example, demo_user2. And that password has changed because I logged in with that from Debian. And we'll add that now. Voila. It works. And it sees the name demo_user2. That user can now work with this Fedora computer to log on and log in directly to the to the IPA server. Let's add the other user. Again, enterprise login, example.com. And that was william.penn. Password, that also was changed when we logged in from Debian. And that's saved at the IPA server. We'll add that. And there we go. William Penn is now added and has the ability to connect from this client. If we log out, you'll see those users here. That user could click, type in his or her password, press enter, and get accepted in. We haven't done anything with profiles or home directories or backgrounds or directories that the person has access to, permissions, any of this stuff. We haven't talked about groups. We haven't talked about organizational units, but we could do all of that with IPA, just like any other directory server. So that's it. The IPA server is set up. It has connectivity to the DNS server. Some more work to do with that, but at least it is up and running. And we have the, I'm going to exit out of this one. And we have the Debian clients able to connect using IPA client, and we have Fedora client able to connect using IPA client. And if we do that IPA user find all, we'll find those users that we created, and it'll tell you all the information about them and additional info of where they logged on from and so forth. But there's so much to this. I mean, there's a ton of stuff when it comes to directory services. We have just scratched the surface, but I hope that this video kind of helped out with this. I also have some commands that you can run here, putting it all together, checking the status of your services. So for example, I have a lot of windows open. So for example, here we could check the status of the service of the IPA server with the systemctl status IPA. You want to make sure that's active. With your bind server, this is the command. With your Kia DHCP server, that's the command to check the status. You could also check all status on Debian with the service space / status all. Or you could do this command on most distributions, systemctl / full / type service -all. It's kind of a long command, but that's a systemctl / full / type service and then -all. And it'll show you everything that's active and inactive on that server. Firewall D is active. Well, yes, we need that. IPA is active, and so on. So that's a nice command. journalctl command to find out more information about those. And then you can run commands to listen to your ports and see what's open on a particular system, like ss-tulwn. Which will show you the ports that are open. And this is the IPA server. And you can see we have port 88 open. We have 464. That's all the Kerberos stuff. We've got, if we look further down, 389, 636 for LDAP. We've got port 80 and 443 here. We don't have 53 because we're not running DNS here, right? Lots of other commands to find out ports, netstat, lsoff, and so on. And finally, you could also use nmap. I have nmap running on my local system here, my local Linux server. And so that is a great program to use. We could do a -s capital S to check the ports open on a particular computer, like our IPA server. Oop, gotta be using the right privileges. So we'll do that again. That'll do a scan of TCP ports. And it'll do that on the IPA server. Give that a moment. There we go. And it sees it in a nice little format there. SSH is open on 22, HTTP, Kerberos, LDAP, HTTPS, Kerberos password, LDAP SSL. Oh, and the Zeus admin port, one of my favorite, 9090, which I did not show. Let me connect to that. I'm just opening a browser in another screen here. https://172.21.0.53:9090. Okay, I haven't set up a certificate for this yet, so we have to go to advanced and proceed for now, and then we can log in to that Fedora server that's running IPA. I'm doing that with the root account. Normally I would not do that, but you can see the basic health of this server. You can see the services that are running. And if you have any issues here, you could restart those from here. You can also connect And this is basically the whole cockpit connection. You can also connect and do lots of stuff in a GUI format from a web console for adding users and computers and so on. So I can see all this with the nmap command. If I run the nmap command against .51, all I should see is port 22 and 53. I should see, I'm not going to see 67 because this particular command only checks TCP ports. So it sees TCP port 22 and 53 is open. If we want to do UDP ports, the scans take a long time. So it's better to do it by the port. And I have that here. nmap-s uppercase U. You could do that to the IP, but it could take a long time to scan it, depending on the speed of your computer and network. So instead, we can do a -v for verbose, not necessary, and a -p and the port, and then the IP address. So let's bring that back up here. This is my main system. We'll do one more nmap command, and then we can shut everything down. So -s capital U, and of course you have to have nmap installed to do all this. -p, and I'm going to check port 53. You know what? I'm going to check port 67 because we didn't see that on the list on my dev server. It initiates that and it goes very quickly, and it does see that 67 is open. UDP 67 is open. We could do the same thing for port 53. And it sees that that is open as well because it's running DNS. And it sees 67 because it's running DHCP server. And that's it. Everything is up and running and connected. That was what I wanted to complete during a webinar. So I just wanted to show all kinds of stuff there to kind of tie everything together. And so good luck to you all with your servers and your clients and technology in general. Thanks again.